I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her, because the truth that I'd been lied to from the start was too much to face. She said she was working toward her future, but she was just erasing mine. The candles flickered between us at that beachside restaurant near Boracay, casting dancing shadows across Teresina's face as she reached for my weathered hand. The ocean breeze carried the scent of grilled fish and frangipani, mixing with her jasmine perfume in a way that made my chest tight with emotion. "Russell, I'm so lucky to have a man who believes in me," she whispered, her voice soft as silk against the sound of waves lapping the shore. Her fingers traced the scars on my knuckles. 40 years of fixing bus engines had left their mark, but she touched them like they were precious. "You deserve everything good in this world, love," I told her, my Manchester accent thick with emotion as I raised my San Miguel bottle. The beer was warm, but her smile was warmer. "To your future. To our future." She lifted her glass of fresh mango juice, the condensation dripping onto the white tablecloth. "To the man who saved my dreams," she said, clinking her glass against my bottle. The sound was small and perfect, like a bell announcing something sacred. Just 3 hours earlier, I'd stood in the Western Union office in downtown Calibo, hands shaking as I filled out the transfer form. 80,000, nearly 1,200 pounds of my pension wired to her account for what she called my final semester fees at Central Philippine University. The Filipino clerk had asked twice if I was sure about the amount. "It's for my girlfriend's education," I'd said proudly. "She's going to be a teacher." Now, watching her eyes sparkle in the candlelight, I felt like more than just a retired mechanic from a forgotten corner of Manchester. I felt like a provider again, a protector, maybe even a hero. "When I finish my degree next month," she said, leaning forward conspirationally, "we can start seriously planning the English Academy. Craig's Corner, remember?" The name made me laugh every time my surname combined with her vision for changing young Filipino lives through proper English education. "With your experience working with real people and my understanding of local education needs," she continued, "we'll transform this community." I reached across the table and cupped her face in my palm. Her skin was soft, untouched by the Manchester rain and factory smoke that had aged me before my time. "You already transformed me," I whispered. She turned her head to kiss my palm, her lips warm against my skin. "I love you, Russell Craig," she said. "I love everything about you." I believed every word. How could I not? This brilliant, beautiful woman saw something in a broken-down old man that even I couldn't see anymore. But let me tell you how this all started. Back when my life in Manchester felt like waiting to die. My flat on Oldham Road was a tomb too, bedrooms I didn't need. Silence broken only by the football commentary. I kept on mute because even noise felt too heavy. Mrs. Patterson next door had stopped saying hello after her husband died. The postman delivered bills and junk mail to a man who might as well have been a ghost. 3 years since my daughter Marianne stopped calling. 3 years since the cancer took her mother. 3 years since I mattered to anyone in this world. I'd wake up at 6:30 every morning, force of habit, from 40 years of early shifts at the bus depot, make tea with one bag because there was no point in wasting, sit in my chair by the window, and watch the world move on without me. Young couples pushed prams down the street, heading to lives full of purpose and love. I'd count the hours until bedtime, then lie awake, counting the reasons I had nothing left to live for. The phone only rang for spam calls about insurance I didn't need for a life I wasn't really living. "Are you interested in funeral plans, Mr. Craig?" they'd ask, and I'd think, "More than you know, love." Then one rainy Tuesday evening in November, as I contemplated another frozen dinner and wondered if anyone would find my body before it started to smell, a Facebook message popped up on my laptop. The notification sound startled me. I'd forgotten people could still reach me in this digital wasteland. "Hi, sir. I hope you don't mind me messaging a stranger. I saw your profile and noticed you're from England. I'm studying to be an English teacher here in the Philippines, and I want to improve my conversation skills with a native speaker. Maybe we can talk sometime? I promise I'm not a scammer, just a girl chasing her dreams. The profile picture showed a young woman with kind eyes, shoulder-length black hair, and a smile that seemed genuine even through a pixelated screen. Teresina Valmores. Current education. Central Philippine University, Iloilo City. Occupation. Student. I stared at that message for 2 hours, reading it over and over, wondering if this was some elaborate hoax or if someone in this world actually needed something I could give. Finally, as the clock struck midnight, I typed back, "I'd be happy to help, love. What would you like to know?" Her response came immediately, despite it being morning in the Philippines. "Really? You'd talk to me? Oh my goodness, thank you so much. I can't believe a real English gentleman wants to help." We arranged our first video call for the next evening. I spent the entire day cleaning my flat, shaving properly for the first time in months, even buying a new shirt from Marks and Spencer. When her face appeared on my laptop screen, I forgot how to breathe. She was more beautiful than her photos, animated and bright, sitting in what looked like a simple but tidy room with religious paintings on the walls. "Sir Russell, you look exactly like a proper English professor," she laughed, and the sound was like music after years of silence. "Please, just call me Russell," I said, suddenly self-conscious about my appearance. "And you're far too young and pretty to be calling an old bloke like me, sir." She blushed and covered her face with her hands. "You're too kind. I'm just a simple girl from Iloilo, trying to improve my future." For the next 3 hours, we talked about everything and nothing. She asked about proper pronunciation, giggled at my Manchester accent, showed me her textbooks through the camera. "Listen to how I say this word," she'd say, carefully enunciating English phrases. "Is my accent too strong?" Her English was nearly perfect, far better than many native speakers I knew, but I found myself inventing small corrections just to keep the conversation going. When we finally said goodbye, I realized I was smiling for the first time in months. We talked every night after that, video calls that stretched past midnight my time, morning coffee for her. She'd hold up her university assignments, ask for help with essays about English literature, tell me about her dreams of opening her own language academy someday. "I want to help Filipino children speak like you," she'd say earnestly. "Proper English is their passport to better opportunities." I started looking forward to these calls like a starving man anticipates meals. She made me feel useful again, needed, important. "You're so wise, Russell," she'd say, when I'd ramble about life in England or my years fixing buses. "I feel so lucky to learn from someone with your experience." After 6 weeks of nightly conversations, she mentioned struggling to pay for her final semester. "The fees went up this year," she explained, her usual bright demeanor clouded with worry. "I don't know how I'll manage. My family already sacrificed so much for my education." Something shifted in my chest, a protective instinct I thought had died with my marriage. "Don't worry about that, love," I heard myself saying. "I have some savings, and I think it's time I visited the Philippines. We should meet properly." Her face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? You'd come all this way for me? But what about the expense, the long flight?" I was already pulling up airline websites before she finished speaking. "Money's no good sitting in a bank when it could change someone's life," I said. "Besides, I've been thinking about traveling again, seeing the world before I'm too old to enjoy it." The truth was simpler and more desperate. She was the only person who made me feel alive, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing that feeling to something as mundane as university fees. The moment I stepped off that Philippine Airlines flight at Iloilo Airport, the humid air wrapping around me like a warm, living thing, I felt like I was waking up from a 3-year coma. Everything was explosion of color and chaos and life: jeepneys painted like moving carnival rides, vendors hawking balut and fresh lumpia, children darting between taxis, shouting, "Hello, Joe," at every foreigner they spotted. The noise was overwhelming after years of Manchester silence, but it was good noise, alive noise, hopeful noise. And there she was, standing behind the arrivals barrier like something out of a dream, radiant in a yellow sundress that made her skin glow golden under the terminal lights. She held a handmade sign that read, "Welcome to the Philippines, Sir Russell," decorated with little hearts and smiley faces. When she saw me emerge from the customs area, dragging my ancient suitcase and looking around in wonder, she started jumping up and down like a schoolgirl. "Russell! Russell! Over here!" She ran to me as fast as her sandals would allow, nearly knocking me over as she threw her arms around my neck. "You're really here," she breathed against my ear, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe you're really here." I held her tight, breathing in her jasmine shampoo and the faint scent of tropical flowers that seemed to cling to everything in this magical place. "Neither can I, love," I whispered back. "Neither can I." That first week was pure enchantment. She took me everywhere like a proud tour guide showing off her favorite treasures. We rode calisas through the old Spanish district of Iloilo City, the horses' hooves clicking rhythmically on ancient cobblestones, while she pointed out centuries-old churches and explained their histories. "This is where Spanish conquistadors first landed," she said, her hand warm in mine as we walked through Calle Real. "Can you imagine? All that history right under our feet." We visited Jaro Cathedral, where she lit candles and prayed in rapid Tagalog, while I stood awkwardly nearby, not knowing the protocol but moved by her devotion. "I prayed for us," she said simply as we left, "for our future together." We took a day trip to Guimaras Island, where she fed me the sweetest mangoes I'd ever tasted and laughed as juice ran down my chin. "You eat like a child," she giggled, using her napkin to clean my face with maternal tenderness. It's beautiful to see someone experience simple pleasures. But the crown jewel of our touring was Central Philippine University. She walked me through the sprawling campus like she owned every brick and tree, pointing out her favorite study spots, introducing me to security guards who greeted her by name. "This is my boyfriend from England," she'd announce proudly. "He's here to see where I'm becoming a teacher." We sat under acacia trees where she claimed to spend hours reading English literature. She showed me the building where her education classes were held, the library where she researched lesson plans for her future academy. "Everything I'm working toward is right here," she said, spreading her arms wide to encompass the whole university. "This place is changing my life." I bought her a used Dell laptop that afternoon. Her old one was apparently broken beyond repair, and we spent the evening at her apartment, setting it up for her schoolwork. Her place was small but tidy, decorated with family photos and religious imagery, textbooks stacked neatly on a simple wooden desk. "Now I can type my final thesis properly," she said, running her fingers over the keyboard like it was made of gold. "You've given me everything I need to succeed." We started planning our future English academy in earnest. "Craig's Corner," she'd say dreamily as we walked along the Iloilo River each evening, watching bancas drift past in the fading light. "We'll have conversation classes for adults, pronunciation workshops for children, maybe even weekend seminars for teachers who want to improve their skills." Her enthusiasm was infectious. I found myself sketching classroom layouts on napkins, calculating startup costs, dreaming about changing lives through education. "When I graduate next month," she'd say, leaning against my shoulder as fishermen cast their nets in the distance, "everything changes. We can make this dream real." For the first time in years, I had something to look forward to beyond my next meal or television program. This wasn't just romance, it was resurrection, rebirth, return to relevance. I mattered again. But as days turned into weeks, small inconsistencies started nibbling at the edges of my happiness like termites in paradise. I'd arrived to pick her up from class one afternoon, only to find the education building locked tight, security guards nowhere to be seen. "Early dismissal," she'd explain with a quick smile, steering me toward a nearby coffee shop. Professor Hernandez had a family emergency. Her textbooks never seemed to move from their spots on her bedroom shelf, same pages marked with the same bookmarks, gathering dust like props in a theater production. I started noticing how she'd glance at her phone constantly during our dinners, quickly dismissing incoming messages as group assignments or classmate questions, before silencing the device and focusing back on me with apologetic smiles. "Sorry, love. You know how university students are always panicking about deadlines. The doubt crept in slowly, like water seeping through concrete. One evening, while she showered after our day trip to Bacolod Beach, I was searching for her phone charger in her bedroom drawer. My fingers found an envelope buried beneath old receipts, hair ties, and expired coupons. Inside, folded carefully in thirds, was an official-looking document from Central Philippine University, Bachelor of Arts in English Education, magna cum laude, awarded to Teresina Santos Valmores, dated the 15th of May, 2012, 10 years old. My hands started shaking as I stared at the elegant calligraphy spelling out her name, her achievement, her graduation from the very program she claimed to be currently completing. She wasn't a student struggling through her final semester. She hadn't been a student for a decade. Every story she'd told me, every struggle she'd shared, every dream we'd built together, all of it, constructed on a lie so fundamental, it made my head spin and my chest tight with something between heartbreak and nausea. I heard the shower shut off and quickly buried the diploma back under the receipts, my heart pounding like I'd been caught stealing. When she emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in a pink towel with her hair dripping wet, she took one look at my face and frowned with concern. "Everything okay, love? You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced what I hoped was a normal smile and mumbled something about feeling tired from too much sun. But inside, my carefully constructed world was cracking apart like an egg dropped on concrete. Still, I said nothing. Some part of me hoped there was a reasonable explanation. Some part of me wasn't ready to lose the first person who'd made me feel truly alive in 3 years. Some part of me would rather live in a beautiful lie than face an ugly truth. 2 sleepless nights later, lying in my hotel bed, staring at the ceiling fan while she slept peacefully beside me, I couldn't contain the secret anymore. The weight of knowing was crushing my chest, making it hard to breathe. Impossible to pretend everything was normal. I waited until we were having breakfast at her favorite cafe near the university. Ironic choice, considering what I was about to discuss. She was buttering her pandesal and humming softly, looking radiant in the morning light filtering through the restaurant's windows. I pulled the diploma from my jacket pocket, unfolded it carefully, and placed it on the table between her coffee cup and my scrambled eggs. "Teresina," I said as gently as I could manage, "I found this in your drawer. Can you help me understand what it means?" Her face went through a rapid series of transformations: surprise, recognition, panic, and finally something that looked like relief. Then the tears started, flowing like a dam had burst behind her eyes. "Oh God, Russell," she sobbed, her voice breaking apart like glass. "I wanted to tell you. I've been carrying this shame for so long." She collapsed forward, her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with the force of her crying. Other diners started staring, but I didn't care. I reached across the table and gently pulled her hands away from her face. "Talk to me, love. Help me understand." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, tears still streaming down her cheeks. "I did graduate, Russell. I was so proud, so ready to change the world through teaching. But then I met someone, my ex-boyfriend Carlos. He convinced me I was too good for public school teaching, that I should aim higher, be more ambitious. He made me feel like my degree wasn't enough, like I needed to keep studying, keep improving, keep reaching for something better." She wiped her nose with a napkin, her breath coming in short gasps between words. "So I dropped out of everything, stopped pursuing teaching positions, stopped believing in myself, stopped dreaming. For years I just drifted, taking odd jobs, feeling like a failure despite having this degree. Carlos made me feel stupid and worthless, like I'd never amount to anything no matter how hard I tried. I felt my heart breaking for her pain, for the vulnerability she was finally showing me. "But why didn't you tell me the truth?" I asked softly. She reached across the table and grabbed my hands like a drowning person grabbing a life preserver. "Because when I met you, for the first time in years, I felt inspired again. I wanted to go back to school, maybe get a master's degree, become the teacher I was meant to be. I re-enrolled this semester to finish some additional certification courses, but I was so ashamed of wasting all those years that I couldn't bring myself to explain my real situation. She squeezed my hands tighter, her voice becoming more urgent. I just needed someone to believe in me first, Russell. Someone to see what I could become, not just what I was. I was going to tell you everything once I felt stronger, once I proved to myself that I could really do this. Tears were flowing down my cheeks now, too. Love, you should have trusted me. I don't care about your past, only your future. Our future. I stood up and moved to her side of the booth, wrapping my arms around her trembling shoulders. We'll get through this together. Your dreams are my dreams now. She looked up at me with grateful, tear-filled eyes and whispered, I love you, Russell Craig. I don't deserve you, but I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. As I held her in that crowded cafe, feeling her gradually stop shaking, I believed every word. How could I not? The woman I loved was showing me her deepest vulnerabilities, trusting me with her most painful secrets. This felt like the beginning of real intimacy, honest partnership, genuine love. The next morning brought renewed energy and excitement. Teresina had transformed overnight from a guilty, secretive woman into an enthusiastic, determined entrepreneur. She spread architectural sketches and business plans across her kitchen table like a general preparing for a victorious campaign. Look what I've been working on in secret, she said, her eyes bright with the kind of excitement I hadn't seen since our first video calls. Craig's English Studio, our English Academy. The drawings were surprisingly professional floor plans, showing bright classrooms, a small library corner, even a coffee area where adult students could practice conversational English in a relaxed setting. She'd calculated everything: rental costs, renovation expenses, furniture needs, marketing budgets. I found the perfect location in Mandurriao, she continued, pointing to photocopied property listings and hand-drawn maps. It's near 3 elementary schools and 2 high schools, right on a main jeepney route. The rent is reasonable, and the landlord is willing to let us renovate to our specifications. She pulled out a manila folder stuffed with research about local competition, demographic studies, even sample lesson plans for different age groups. With $250,000 initial investment, we can renovate the space, buy proper furniture and teaching materials, and have enough operating capital for the first 6 months. My pension could cover that amount easily, more than cover it. But this is the best part, she said, reaching across the table to take my hands in hers. We'll be equal partners, Russell. 50-50 ownership. Your experience working with regular people from all walks of life, combined with my education background and knowledge of local learning needs, will be unstoppable. I felt that familiar rush of purpose flooding through my chest, filling empty spaces I'd forgotten existed. This was what I'd been missing in Manchester, not just love or companionship, but a mission. A reason to wake up every morning with enthusiasm instead of resignation. Let's do it, I said already, reaching for my phone to call my bank back in England. Let's build something amazing together. That afternoon, we drove to see the building in her cousin Miguel's motorcycle sidecar, a harrowing but exhilarating journey through Iloilo traffic that had me laughing like a schoolboy. The property was perfect. A 2-story concrete building with large windows, ideal for classrooms, and a small courtyard where students could practice pronunciation without disturbing neighbors. Miguel met us there with a briefcase full of paperwork and a firm handshake. Welcome to the Philippines business community, Sir Russell, he laughed, slapping my back with genuine warmth. My cousin is very lucky to have found such a generous and supportive partner. I signed documents written in a mixture of English and Tagalog, transferred money to bank accounts I couldn't pronounce, posed for photos with Teresina and Miguel in front of our future academy. But none of the bureaucratic confusion mattered because I felt more alive than I had in years. We were building something real, something meaningful, something that would outlast both of us. In 6 months, Teresina said, as we stood in the empty main room, envisioning rows of eager students. Children from this neighborhood will be speaking English like little professionals because of what we're creating here. I believed her completely. I believed in us completely. 2 weeks later, while Teresina was attending what she called a mandatory teacher training seminar in Bacolod City, I decided to surprise her with an impromptu visit to our construction site. I wanted to see the progress the workers had made, maybe bring them cold drinks and lunch as a gesture of appreciation for their hard work on our dream. The jeepney ride through familiar Iloilo streets felt different this time. I was no longer a tourist being shown around, but a local businessman checking on his investment. The morning sun was already blazing hot when the driver dropped me off at the corner near our building, and I could hear the sounds of construction echoing from inside. But as I approached the property, something made my blood freeze in my veins. A large banner stretched across the building's facade, bright red letters on yellow background spelling out Valmore's Language Learning Center opening soon. No mention of Craig, no mention of our partnership, no mention of me at all. I stood there on the sidewalk, feeling the tropical heat suddenly turn cold against my skin, watching Filipino workers hang smaller signs advertising expert English instruction by certified professionals and accredited by the Department of Education. My legs felt unsteady as I walked closer to read the fine print at the bottom of the banner. Proprietor Mrs. Teresina S. Valmores, licensed educator and business owner. Mrs. Valmores, not Miss, not Miss. Mrs., excuse me. I called to the security guard lounging in whatever shade he could find beside the entrance. Can you tell me who owns this building? He looked up from his phone, squinting at me with mild curiosity. Addie Valmores, sir. Very successful lawyer here in Iloilo. This is his wife's new business venture. The words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Wife, marriage, husband. His wife? I managed to ask through a throat that felt like it was closing. Yes, sir, beautiful lady. Very smart businesswoman. They've been planning this language center for many months now. Addie Valmores handles all the legal work. Mrs. Valmores manages the educational side. Very good partnership. Partnership. The word tasted like acid in my mouth. I thanked the guard and walked slowly around the building, reading every sign, every notice, every piece of paper taped to windows and doors. Permits issued to Teresina Santos Valmores. Business licenses registered under Valmores Family Enterprises. Construction contracts signed by attorney Ricardo Valmores on behalf of his spouse. Not one document, not one official piece of paper mentioned Russell Craig or any foreign partnership. I was a ghost in my own investment. When I called her that evening, my hands shaking as I dialed her number, she answered on the first ring with her usual cheerful greeting. Hello, my love. How was your day? I miss you so much. Teresina, I said, my voice sounding strange and hollow even to myself. I visited our construction site today. Silence. Long, heavy silence that stretched across the phone connection like a growing chasm. Russell, she finally said, her voice completely different, now flat, businesslike, devoid of the warmth I'd grown accustomed to. We need to talk when I get back from Bacolod. We need to talk now, I said. I saw the signs. I spoke to the guard. I know about your husband. Another silence, shorter this time. It's not what you think, she said, but there was no emotion in her voice, no urgency to explain or reassure. It was just easier this way. The legal requirements, the permits, the business licenses. Everything's simpler when it's registered under my married name. You understand business, Russell. Sometimes you have to be practical. But I didn't understand. I didn't understand anything anymore. How could the woman who'd cried in my arms about her dreams, who'd planned our future with such passion, speak so coldly about erasing me from the very project I'd funded? What about our partnership? I asked. What about Craig's corner? Russell, she said with a sigh that sounded almost annoyed, you're being emotional. The important thing is that the academy will exist. that we'll be helping students improve their English. Does it really matter whose name is on the building? Yes, I wanted to scream. Yes, it matters. It matters because my name was supposed to be there too. It matters because we were supposed to build this together. It matters because you made me believe I finally had a purpose again. But all I could manage was a week. I thought we were partners. We are partners, she said, but her tone suggested she was already thinking about something else. Just not on paper. Legal partnerships are complicated for foreigners in the Philippines. This way protects both of us. I hung up without saying goodbye and sat in my hotel room staring at the wall, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my silent Manchester flat. I went back to my hotel room and stared at the ceiling. The fan spun lazily overhead, making the same rhythmic whir as the air tools I used to use on bus engines back at the depot, except this time I couldn't fix what was broken. I didn't eat dinner that night. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't even cry. Just lay there on the narrow hotel bed, still wearing the clothes I'd put on that morning when the world made sense, replaying every conversation, every promise, every moment of tenderness. The laptop sat closed on the desk beside 2 empty beer bottles, my pathetic attempt at drowning sorrows that refused to drown. The plane ticket home lay on the nightstand, still 10 days away, feeling like a prison sentence. I kept thinking about the security guard's words. They've been planning this for months. Months. While I was falling in love with her voice through video calls, she was planning a business with her husband. While I was booking flights and dreaming of our future, she was filing paperwork under her married name. While I was buying her laptops and believing her tears, she was constructing an elaborate performance designed to extract my pension money as efficiently as possible. I called my bank in Manchester at 3 a.m, desperate to freeze whatever remained of my accounts before she could access more. "I'm sorry, Mr. Craig," the polite customer service representative explained with professional sympathy, "but those transfers you authorized were completed several days ago. The funds have been withdrawn and are no longer recoverable through our systems. Gone. All of it. 330,000, nearly 5,000 pounds of my retirement savings dissolved into someone else's dream while I slept soundly beside the woman who'd taken it. 40 years of honest work, of fixing engines and saving every penny I could, of living modestly so I'd have something for my old age, all of it transferred to a woman whose real name I didn't even know until I saw it on official documents. I thought about calling my daughter Mary Ann back in England. The clock on my phone showed it would be early evening in Manchester. She'd probably be making dinner for her family, helping her children with homework, living the normal life I'd abandoned to chase a fantasy in a foreign country. What would I tell her? That her father, who she already thought was a pathetic old fool, had somehow found new depths of stupidity? That I'd given everything to a stranger on the other side of the world? That the man who'd raised her to be cautious and practical had thrown away his future for pretty words from a woman half his age? No. This shame was mine to carry alone. I'd already lost her respect when I withdrew from the family after her mother died. I wouldn't compound that loss by admitting I'd become exactly the kind of person we used to laugh about on television, a lonely old man scammed by a foreign woman who told him what he needed to hear. I turned off the phone and lay in the dark, listening to the sounds of Iloilo nightlife filtering through the thin hotel walls. Jeepneys rumbling past, young people laughing on their way to bars, the distant sound of karaoke from a nearby restaurant. Life continuing normally while my world collapsed in a hotel room that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. I wrote a letter I'll never send. Not to demand explanations or threaten legal action or vent my rage, but to free myself from the weight of words I needed to say to someone, even if that someone would never read them. I found hotel stationery in the desk drawer and wrote by hand, my penmanship shaky from exhaustion and emotion. "Dear Teresina," I began, then crossed it out and started again. "Dear Mrs. Valmorris," felt too formal. "Dear Teresina," it was. "I don't hate you. I'm not even angry anymore, which probably surprises both of us. I'm just sad not because you took my money, but because you took something I can never get back. You took my ability to trust completely, to love without question, to believe in beautiful stories. You took the last of my hope that someone could see value in a worn-out old man with nothing special to offer the world. I wrote about understanding her now, how she must have seen me as exactly what I was. A desperate foreign pensioner with more money than sense, lonely enough to believe any story that made him feel needed again. I don't blame you for being clever, I continued. I don't blame you for surviving in whatever way you could. I don't even blame you for taking what I offered freely, enthusiastically, gratefully. You saw an opportunity and you took it. That's not evil, it's just human. But I also wrote about the cost of her survival strategy. You made me believe in something that was never real. You made me plan a future that you never intended to share. You made me feel alive again just long enough to remember what being truly dead feels like. That's the part that hurts, not the money, but the hope. Not the loss, but the reminder of how much I had to lose. I wrote about learning something I'd refused to accept back in Manchester. You can't buy connection. You can't purchase love. You can't transfer your way into someone's heart through a bank account. Maybe that's worth $330,000, I wrote. Maybe that's worth everything. Maybe it's worth learning at 68 that I still have enough heart left to break. I folded the letter carefully, sealed it in a hotel envelope, and threw it in the wastebasket beside the desk. Then I deleted her number from my phone, blocked her on Facebook, canceled the visa support application I'd been preparing for her to visit England. I called Filipina Airlines and changed my flight destination. Not back to Manchester and its empty silences, but to Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. Somewhere I'd never been. Somewhere without any memories of her smile or her lies or her carefully constructed dreams. The final week in the Philippines passed like a fever dream. I moved out of the hotel where we'd shared so many nights and into a small pension house near the airport, a place where no one knew my story or cared about my heartbreak. I spent my days walking through Iloilo like a ghost, revisiting all the places she'd shown me but seeing them with different eyes. The university where she'd claimed to be studying looked smaller, less magical. The restaurants where we'd planned our future felt hollow and stage-like. The jeepneys that had once seemed charmingly chaotic now just looked loud and confusing. I ate alone, in places where we'd shared meals, watching Filipino families laugh together and wondering how many other foreign men like me were sitting in similar restaurants, believing similar lies from women who'd learned that loneliness could be profitable. On my last day, I took a tricycle to the construction site one final time. The banner was gone, replaced by professional signage that looked expensive and permanent. Valmore's Language Learning Center now accepting enrollments. Through the windows, I could see classroom furniture being arranged, whiteboards being mounted, educational posters being hung on freshly painted walls. It looked exactly like the academy we'd planned together, except I'd never existed. A group of children walked past on their way home from school, chattering excitedly in Hiligaynon and broken English. "Good afternoon, sir," one of them called to me with a wide smile. "Are you visiting our new English school?" I wanted to tell him yes, I was visiting the school I'd paid for but would never teach in. I wanted to explain that his English lessons would be funded by an old man's pension and dreams. Instead, I just smiled and said, "It looks like a wonderful place to learn." Because it did. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the lies and the carefully orchestrated theft of my future, the academy would probably succeed. Children would learn better English because of what had happened to me. Teachers would improve their skills. Lives would change for the better. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that had to be enough. At Iloilo Airport, waiting for my flight to Vietnam, I bought a postcard showing the beautiful Mia Gao Church and wrote a brief message to myself. "Russell, you came here looking for love and found education instead. Not the kind you expected, but the kind you needed. R." I mailed it to my flat in Manchester, knowing it would arrive long after I did, a reminder from the man I used to be to the man I was becoming. The flight to Ho Chi Minh City gave me 12 hours to think, suspended between the country that had broken my heart and whatever was waiting for me next. I stared out the airplane window at clouds that looked like cotton wool scattered across an endless blue canvas and tried to process what had really happened to me. Not just the money was replaceable, eventually. Not just the betrayal I'd been betrayed before, by life if not by lovers, but the realization that I'd been so desperate for connection that I'd ignored every warning sign, every inconsistency, every moment when my gut told me something wasn't right. I'd chosen to believe because believing felt better than facing the truth about my loneliness. As we descended into Vietnam, I made myself a promise. I would never again mistake need for love, desperation for devotion, or my own wishes for someone else's reality. Ho Chi Minh City hit me like a friendly assault on all five senses. If Iloilo had been charming chaos, Vietnam was magnificent madness. Motorbikes swarmed through streets like schools of fish. Vendors sold steaming pho from carts that smelled like heaven. And everywhere I looked, there were smiles from people who didn't want anything from me, except maybe to sell me a coffee or point me toward the nearest pagoda. I checked into a small hotel in District 1. Nothing fancy but clean and honest. Two qualities I was learning to value more than elegance or romance. For the first week, I did nothing but walk. Miles and miles through districts with names I couldn't pronounce, past markets selling fruits I'd never seen, along the Saigon River where couples sat sharing ice cream and old men played chess under banyan trees. Nobody knew my story here. Nobody cared that I was a retired bus mechanic who'd been fooled by a beautiful woman. I was just another Western tourist exploring Vietnam, and that anonymity felt like freedom. Slowly, carefully, I began to rebuild my sense of self. I took Vietnamese in language lessons at a community center, sitting alongside backpackers half my age and retirees from Australia who'd come to Vietnam for the same reasons I had to start over somewhere new. Xin Chao. I'd practice saying, and the teacher would laugh kindly at my Manchester accent attempting Vietnamese tones. Very good, Mr. Russell. You sound like a friendly English cow trying to speak Vietnamese. The other students laughed too, but it was warm laughter, inclusive laughter, the kind that invited me in rather than shutting me out. I learned to eat with chopsticks, badly but enthusiastically. I learned to cross streets by walking slowly and trusting that the motorbikes would flow around me like water around a stone. I learned that Vietnamese coffee was strong enough to wake the dead and that bia hoi with strangers could lead to friendships that transcended language barriers. One afternoon, sitting in a small cafe in the French Quarter, watching the organized chaos of Vietnamese life unfold outside the window, I struck up a conversation with another English expat. David was 73, a former teacher from London who'd moved to Ho Chi Minh City 5 years earlier after his wife died. Best decision I ever made, he said, sipping his café soda and watching a woman on a motorbike somehow balance 3 live chickens, 2 bags of rice, and a small child on her way to market. England was full of memories I couldn't escape. Here, every day is new. I found myself telling him about Teresina, about the money, about feeling like the world's most foolish old man. He listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, letting me get it all out. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You know what the difference is between a wise man and a fool? He finally asked. A fool makes mistakes and learns nothing. A wise man makes mistakes and learns everything. Which one are you going to be? It was a simple question that cut straight to the heart of my choice. Stay bitter about what I'd lost, or become grateful for what I'd learned. I chose gratitude. Not immediately. Healing isn't that simple or that fast. But gradually, day by day, I started focusing on what Teresina had actually given me, rather than what she'd taken away. She'd gotten me out of my Manchester flat and back into the world. She'd reminded me that I was capable of love, of hope, of believing in something bigger than my own small existence. She'd shown me that at 68, I could still feel my heart race when someone smiled at me, still imagine building something meaningful with another person, still find the courage to leave everything familiar behind and start over in a foreign country. Yes, she'd lied to me. Yes, she'd used my loneliness against me. Yes, she'd taken my money and broken my trust. But she'd also accidentally given me the greatest gift possible, proof that I wasn't as dead inside as I'd thought. I started volunteering at an English conversation club for Vietnamese university students. Twice a week, I'd sit in a circle with young people eager to practice their language skills, and we'd talk about everything and nothing. They'd ask me about life in England, about Manchester United, about what it was like to be old. I'd ask them about their dreams, their families, their hopes for the future. "Mr. Russell," one young woman named Lynn said during one of our sessions, "why did you come to Vietnam? Most English people your age stay home with their families." I thought about how to answer honestly without telling them the whole sad story. "I came here to remember who I am when I'm not who I used to be," I said finally. They nodded as if this made perfect sense, which maybe it did to people young enough to still believe in reinvention. The months passed quietly, peacefully. I established routines that had nothing to do with anyone else's schedule or needs. Morning walks along the river, Vietnamese lessons 3 times a week, afternoon, coffee at my favorite cafe, evening meals at street food stalls where the vendors started recognizing me and would have my usual order ready before I asked. I read books I'd always meant to read, watched Vietnamese films with subtitles I could barely follow. I learned to appreciate the beauty of a language that sounded like music, even when I couldn't understand the words. I made friends with other expats, but I also made sure I could be happy alone. I'd learned the hard way that depending on others for my sense of worth was a recipe for disaster. One evening, almost a year after leaving the Philippines, I was sitting in my favorite cafe when a young couple at the next table caught my attention. He was clearly Western Australian, judging by his accent, and she was Vietnamese. They were holding hands across the table, gazing at each other with the kind of intensity I remembered feeling with Teresina. "I've never met anyone like you," he was saying. "You make me want to be a better man." She smiled shyly and said something about how lucky she was to find someone who understood her dreams. I watched them for a while, feeling no jealousy or bitterness, just a kind of gentle recognition. Maybe their love was real. Maybe it would last. Maybe she genuinely cared for him and wasn't just telling him what he needed to hear. I hoped so. I really did. But I also knew that if it turned out to be another beautiful lie, he'd survive it. We all do, somehow. I never heard from Teresina again. No follow-up messages, no attempts to explain or apologize, no requests for more money. I was simply erased from her life as efficiently as I'd been erased from her business documents. Sometimes I wondered if she ever thought about me, if she felt any guilt about what she'd done, if she ever considered the human cost of her financial strategy. Mostly, though, I tried not to think about her at all. She was a chapter in my story, not the whole book, and I had other chapters to write. 2 years into my Vietnamese adventure, I received an unexpected email that would test everything I'd learned about myself. It was from my daughter Marianne, the first communication we'd had since before my trip to the Philippines. "Dad," she wrote, "I know we haven't spoken in a long time, and I know I've been angry about a lot of things, but I've been thinking about you, wondering how you are, missing the father I used to know before Mum died. I heard from Mrs. Patterson that you've been traveling, living abroad. I'd like to talk if you're willing. I'd like to try again." I stared at that email for hours, reading it over and over, feeling emotions I'd buried years ago bubbling back to the surface. Part of me wanted to respond immediately, to pour out everything that had happened since we'd last spoken, to rebuild our relationship with the honesty and vulnerability I'd learned to practice in Vietnam. But another part of me was terrified. What if I'd changed too much? What if she couldn't accept the man I'd become? What if I disappointed her again? I decided to call her. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, and when I heard her voice saying, "Hello?" I almost hung up. "Marianne," I said instead, "it's your dad." Silence. Then, "Dad? Oh my God, Dad, where are you? I've been so worried." We talked for 3 hours that night. Me sitting on my hotel balcony watching Vietnamese life flow past on the street below, her in her kitchen in Manchester making tea and occasionally wiping away tears I could hear in her voice. I told her about Vietnam, about learning to be alone without being lonely, about discovering that starting over was possible at any age. I didn't tell her about Teresina. That story was still too raw, too shameful, too complicated to share with a daughter who was just learning to trust me again. "You sound different, Dad," she said toward the end of our conversation. "Calmer, more present." "I feel different," I admitted. "I feel like myself again, but a better version. Does that make sense?" "It makes perfect sense," she said. "When are you coming home? I'd like you to meet your grandchildren properly. They barely remember you." Home, the word hung in the air between England and Vietnam, full of possibilities and complications. "Soon," I told her, "but not permanently. I think I've found something here worth keeping." "As long as you've found yourself," she said, "that's what matters." Now I sit in this same cafe in Ho Chi Minh City, 3 years after fleeing the Philippines with my heart in pieces and my bank account emptied, writing in a journal I started keeping to track my progress toward becoming the man I want to be. The motorbikes still zip past like colorful fish in a concrete reef. Vendors still call out their wares in melodic Vietnamese, and I still marvel at how much life can change when you let it. I'm planning a trip back to Manchester next month, not to stay, but to visit, to reconnect with Marianne and her family, to show them the man I've become in this strange and wonderful country. Then I'll return to Vietnam, to the life I've built here, to the community of friends who know me as Russell the English teacher. Not Russell the fool who got taken by a pretty woman with a sad story. I think about Teresina sometimes, but not with anger anymore. I hope her language center is successful. I hope she's helping children learn English and build better futures for themselves. I hope she's found whatever she was really looking for when she decided to target lonely foreign men with more money than sense. I even hope she's happy, though I suspect happiness might be harder for her to achieve than money. Living with the knowledge that you've built your success on other people's pain has to leave marks on your soul, even if you've convinced yourself that everyone involved got what they deserved. Craig's Corner was never real, was it? Just a beautiful story we told each other, she, to get what she needed, me to feel what I wanted. But here's what I've learned in these quiet Vietnamese years. I don't need someone else's corner anymore. I've found my own space in the world, carved out through small daily choices to be present, to be grateful, to be open to whatever comes next without trying to control it or force it into the shape of my fantasies. I'm still Russell Craig, still a retired bus mechanic from Manchester, still a man who believes in love and connection and the possibility of changing lives through kindness. But I'm also something new, a man who knows the difference between loneliness and solitude, between love and need, between hope and delusion. The cafe owner, Mrs. Nguyen, brings me my usual afternoon coffee without being asked. "You look happy today, Mr. Russell," she says in her careful English. "Something good happen?" I smile at her, this kind woman who's become part of my chosen Vietnamese family, and realize she's right. I am happy. Not the desperate, dependent happiness I felt with Teresina, but something quieter and more sustainable. The happiness of a man who's learned to be enough for himself while still being open to whatever gifts the universe might send his way. Yes, I tell her, something very good happened. I remembered who I am. The motorbikes keep spinning past, carrying people toward destinations I'll never know, and I keep watching, grateful to be here, grateful to be alive, grateful to have learned that the best revenge against those who try to diminish you is simply to become more yourself than you ever thought possible. I take out my phone and start typing a message to Marianne, looking forward to seeing you next month. I have so many stories to tell you about the man your father became when he finally learned to love himself first. I hit send and order another coffee. There's still plenty of afternoon left, and I'm finally ready for whatever comes next.